Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland, and I am one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. Sometimes lawyers get busy because we have cases where we represent other people. We're in one of those periods, which is why we're a little late to the game to talk about the last two-thirds of Bad Batch. So with me is Stephen Tolafield, and we're going to rock out and talk about what we loved about the series and a lot of legal analysis. Stephen, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Good to see you again. It's been ages, and I feel like not just busy in real life stuff too, but gosh, Star Wars has been kind of a busy universe too. There was the end of the Bad Batch, of course, which is a huge deal, and then the Tales of the Empire, Tales of the Dark Side. That show came out, and then it was May the 4th and the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace. And then there's been all the FOMO I've been having over seeing everyone at the Acolyte premieres, which looks amazing, and I can't wait till that comes out. So, yeah, there's just been a ton going on.
Yeah, and it's a great time to be a fan.
Yeah.
We got tickets for Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo.
Yep.
My flight there is booked with points, and
Amazing. Yeah.
that's a nice feeling.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah. Gosh, how could I forget the whole scramble to get celebration tickets with everything else going on? That kind of fell down the bottom of the list, I guess. But that was also a big deal.
it's just April 2025, so a lot to look forward to
Yeah.
in the days ahead.
Yep.
And yeah, I too have FOMO about the Acolyte premiere. It's like, hey, what do we got to do to get invited to that sort of shindig? So
Good for them is what I say. But and it'll be fun to see it for ourselves in just a week, right?
exactly, and it'll be a
Uh,
great time.
yeah.
So let's talk about Bad Batch. We hit the first four episodes. So let's get into this is high-end issue spotting throughout the entire season.
Hmm.
So we have the former separatist Senator Singh and GS8 meeting with Senator Chuchi, and they're basically discussing the beginning of the rebellion,
Hmm.
and which raises the issue: do you have a right to rebel against the Empire?
Mm.
Nothing subtle about that at all.
No, yeah. And it's funny how Chi-Chi's was sort of radicalized by her realization about what was happening to the clones, because that turned out to be kind of a more uh that wasn't obvious to me that that was one of the seeds of the rebellion to kind of the fate of the clones and how they were poorly treated by the Empire. And so that was cool to see that woven into that narrative. And it makes sense from someone who cared about people generally, and how people were treated to see that as an early sign that the Empire was not going to be good for the people who lived anywhere in the galaxy. And so her inclination to do something about it, to begin the rebellion, was a really cool way to work that narrative and kind of resolve what happened in the clone to the clones, weaving that into the larger kind of Star Wars narrative of at least the original trilogy. So I thought that was really great. But yeah, when it comes, oh, go ahead.
No, keep going, keep
I
going.
was going to say when it comes to the legal right to rebel, and however, I mean, obviously in the empire, a fascist society like that is obviously not going to have any legal method for people to express different political opinions or any sort of um, dissent from anything that's going on socially or politically. But in a more democratic society, we expect that people will avail themselves of whatever political process they have to their available to them to try to change what's going on in terms of policy and the body politic. And there's usually no legal right to rebel or foment rebellion. In fact, treason, of course, is a very serious crime. Um, and we don't want that to happen in sort of an ordered society. That's obviously a separate issue of whether there's a moral obligation to sort of reject what an evil thing a government is doing.
Well, that and most governments don't send assassins to kill elected officials,
Exactly.
which is kind of the groundswell for like we got to change things, and we have an emperor.
Yeah.
Democracy's dead.
Yeah.
So what we have now is a fascist dictatorship, that's bumping people off who are raising their voice and it would otherwise be a normal political process.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's very, again, this is now end of May. We just had Memorial Day, and people start thinking about the 4th of July when it's throwing off the shackles of tyranny
Mm.
with an empire from across the seas that was taxing us without representation. So in our country, we have representation, that there's an election every 2 years, presidency every 4 years, special elections annually, local elections annually. So we have a robust process where insurrection's not okay compared to a fascist dictatorship that's starting to make people disappear in the middle of the night.
Right.
I
Good
know.
good opportunity to plug voting.
Yeah,
If you're listening, make sure you have plans to vote
yeah,
this year and every election.
yeah. Register. Local politics really matter because you need to know what's going on where you live. And just thinking like, oh, I'll vote for president. It's like, oh, dude, you have to look bigger than that. You have to think in terms of who's your city council member.
School boards,
Yeah,
community college boards, all that stuff makes a huge difference in the health of your community. So it's very important to vote.
yes. And so because what they have in Star Wars isn't comparable to what we have.
No.
So,
In fact, that was the whole prequel was a failure of democracy. That was the democratic government elected to give up its power and sort of sold the people out to the emperor, and that's how they got in that predicament in the first place. So,
yeah, bureaucracy, lots and lots of bureaucracy. So,
woohoo!
yeah, you need a little. You don't need to be drowning in it.
Yeah,
All right. We have the clones capture the assassin who's CX1. And that raises issues of like, I get capturing them so they can interrogate him and find out what's going on, but the clones have some problems with what they do with the prisoner. So like like they don't bump him off. So like that's a good thing. But the entire episode I was concerned with, are they crossing lines with treatment of prisoners?
yeah.
Yeah, there's no outright torture. So that's good, but
Which was kind of yeah.
I was nervous.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Because it was very refreshing for a Star Wars prisoner scene that no one had like a torture droid summoned and they weren't injected with any sort of, so-called truth serum and they weren't, bodily injured. Although I guess you could say that they removed from his mouth the little device that he would have been able to use to um, silence himself permanently. And so that intrusion, I suppose, is some sort of I don't know. Who knows? Like in the real world, they would need some sort of court order to intrude that way into the bodily autonomy of someone. But
Yeah, but there might be an exigency because it's a suicide tooth,
yeah,
which is not. So you had to take out the suicide tooth because he would have killed himself at any point.
danger to himself. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so I think they would get by on that because if
mm,
there's no less restrictive means
yeah,
to deactivate the tooth if they have to do an extraction. I mean, he wasn't awake for the extraction. So not that I want people practicing dentistry like that.
yeah, yeah.
However, I don't know if there was a less intrusive means to that situation.
Right. Also, I was surprised that they used the little stun. They set their blasters to stun and stunned him, which is sort of a non-lethal way of apprehending someone in the Star Wars universe, which was very refreshing again when troopers and stormtroopers and clones are so eager to pull the trigger.
Most of the heroes have their blasters on stun, which it's throughout the series. I mean,
Yeah,
later on, I mean, when they're in the last episodes, that they switch to kill. Uh, but 90% of the time, the Bad Batch is not killing clones. They have their weapons on stun, and which is a good guy move. They're not the hero shouldn't just rack up a giant body count.
Yeah. And it's great that that um technology or that ability to set up blaster to stun was set up in the very first few moments of the original Star Wars film when it was stormtroopers, the bad guys, using it to apprehend Princess Leia, of course. But that has worked out so beautifully for the narratives later when good guys are not necessarily murdering indiscriminately in their effort to kind of track down their enemies.
Yeah, good observation. So let's jump to contract law examples with Fennec Shand, who our heroes go see. It's just Hunter and Wrecker about trying to get information about M counts because none of the clones know what an M count is. And Shand presses them into service, saying, I will give you this information if you have help me capture Sylar Saris. And the fight with that creature looks like it's straight out of Alien, and it's a little rough. But that gives us a performance contract that Fennec has some undisclosed terms throughout that episode. Uh, Clearly, like some of the risks that could be involved.
Yeah.
Stay on the boat because you have basically alligator type creatures that will try to eat you. So she doesn't disclose all the terms, all the risks, and they're along for the ride. And it's basically you feel like the contract's getting modified as they go. But we find out that the bounty has mines in the river set up to protect his property. You cannot use lethal force to defend your home. So you can't put landmines around your house. You can't put a moat with alligators, no spring guns, none of that. Like you can't have your car wired to explode if somebody tries picking the lock. The if I can't have it, no one can mindset, because that's murder, and you can't murder to defend property. And putting all those mines in the river is defensive property with lethal force, and that's a no-no.
Yeah. Like if someone comes onto your property or is in your home and you have a reasonable belief that they're about to hurt you, then of course you have the ability to defend yourself, self-defense. But that's a very in the moment judgment call that you have to make. It's not that you can just murder people who walk onto your land. That's not a thing.
Or well, the guy on the sidewalk scared me, so I shot him. It's
Right.
like, no, that's not how self-defense works. That's not how stand your ground works.
Nope.
But some people think it is, and that's terrifying.
Yep.
So, no.
Yeah. And by the way, just to go back to the contracts for a moment,
Oh,
I
yes.
get so excited whenever there's a contract in Star Wars because there's always undisclosed terms. There's always some sort of light fraud happening. It's just like low-key fraud to like kind of get someone to like get agree to do whatever it is the thing that they want to have done. Like even in Star Wars when Obi-Wan was like didn't disclose the fact that he had Darth Vader's son and he himself was Darth Vader's like arch nemesis. And Han Solo was really clear about wanting to avoid Imperial entanglements, and yet Obi-Wan sort of conveniently did not disclose the substantial risk that Han Solo is taking on and agreeing to take the fare that they were willing to pay to get to Alderaan.
But I also thought Kenobi said a no questions. So like
Exactly. That's true.
I mean, you're kind of
Yeah,
walking into it at that point. Well, okay, you're gonna pay me like 18 grand. Sure, let's saddle up, boys. Let's go.
that's right. Yeah.
Uh, but these guys are hotter than I thought they were. I believe is like something along. So Han knew what he was getting into. That there
Yeah.
was going to be some shenanigans.
Yeah.
All right, good call. So let's get to Asajj Ventress. So this episode confirmed we could do a mock trial about Ventress at some point because she's alive. Because
Yeah.
one of my mock trial rules is the character can't be dead in canon.
I love that idea.
Yeah, because let's defend her for her actions in the Clone Wars because
Yeah.
she kills lots of people, and there's lots of clones that she kills. There's like in one of the early episodes, she like kisses one, then stabs him with the lightsaber.
Yeah.
That's it's the entire the dark side made me do it defense.
Yeah. And also maybe sort of it'd be interesting to have her be on trial for maybe something much less like something in from the Bad Batch, like just child endangerment or some sort of recklessness when it came to Omega, but then having the prosecution trying to introduce character evidence from how bad a person she is. And then there's sort of being an evidentiary fight kind of at the middle about whether um, this is going to her sort of proclivity to be a bad person or whether her whether that's even admissible when it comes to the conduct that she's accused of doing. So anyway, I think there's a lot of rich stuff there to mine. I think that's a great idea.
And I really like that spin on it because I was looking for crimes as like Dooku's apprentice going out
Sure.
from like a child endangerment issue and
Right.
character evidence. That's a brilliant way to discuss those that evidentiary rule. So
Yeah. And how the law treats redemption or claims of rehabilitation and stuff, and whether, of course, the presumption is that that sort of character evidence is inadmissible, but there are certainly situations where it can come in, and it might be fun to explore that.
absolutely, because again, she's a fascinating character. I Her arc throughout Clone Wars is an adventure because
Hmm.
she's pretty sadistic
Yeah.
early on, and then there's a switch.
Yeah.
So there's the like her and Kenobi have to fight their way out together, and I believe when the Maul arc, and like Kenobi uses one of the red lightsabers because well he had to,
Hmm.
and yeah, I find that fun
Yeah.
because it's one thing if it's a legitimate combat. It's another thing if she's just killing civilians, and I don't remember if she did that. I don't remember if there's any true war crimes that she
Yeah.
commits.
That's a good question. I feel like maybe in the end of the clone, because she was responsible for that. Well, they thought she was responsible for the bombing, but and it turned out she wasn't, right? Um, yeah,
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. That's again hours of discussion that
Yeah.
can be had. And I'm sure there are many fans who are planning their Ventress cosplay with the new outfit and the
Right.
blonde hair.
And
So
that super cute haircut.
it's
I love it.
it's San Diego Comic-Con,
I,
celebration,
I love a glow up. I
yeah,
love it.
everything in between. There are those diehard super fans who are going to pull that off, and God bless them. So rock on, kids, rock on. But let's talk about her training Omega, and is there any child endangerment issues that we have with that? And I don't think she crosses the line with anything. It like there's no like corporal punishment. It's standing on one foot is not. I mean, it's like an agree coach type behavior. There's nothing untoward.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
she's
go on.
yeah, I was gonna say she sort of manages to summon that creature that is very dangerous somehow, or Omega does, right? It's been a
Uh,
few weeks since I've seen that episode. How did that play out?
Ventress did on accident.
Exactly.
So she was trying to bring up some seed creatures, and inadvertently pulled up a big one.
Right.
And because she made the comment about that was not an intentional move on her part, and that's great. It does raise an issue that with she had to fight the sea creature before calming it. So she does use her lightsaber to take out a tentacle or two to free Omega, but then is able to use the force to connect with the creature as a way to calm it down and call off the Bad Batch from doing an airstrike or continued airstrikes on a Kraken. So, but again, wonderful sending Omega on an errand to go get a flower That's cool. Our boy is getting into a giant fight with her. Well, it would have been weird not to have that happen. And good team building. Great team building.
For sure.
Absolutely. Now we have there what I thought was just so ironic. There were so many podcasters out there thinking that one of the CX clones was Tech. I never thought that. I always thought Tech was dead.
Yeah.
And so with the episode named Identity Crisis, people thought, oh, it's going to be Tech. And it's just, it's like, no, sometimes the dead stay dead. Tech's dead. I'm bummed because he's a great character and it highlights the loss that everyone feels. But the identity crisis was Car in realizing, her soul grew back. Because again, this is an adult Omega, and realizing, oh, they're kidnapping children. I
Yeah.
might be on the wrong team here. It's are we the baddies? It's
Yeah.
that realization.
Dot GIF. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Because as soon as a bounty hunter shows up with a toddler, it's like, nope, no. It's like I was uncomfortable with the kids, but I was going to work through it. Now there's a toddler here.
Yeah.
I'm
That
out.
red flag could not be more red.
I can't just like leave. I now have to get these children to safety. So how are we going to play that?
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
mean, it's interesting. It's the kind of moral dilemma that a lot of folks that are whistleblowers, for example, even sort of in a corporate setting, where they've kind of become a part of a community, their place of employment, and then they realize that maybe something that's going on at the place of employment, or if they're in the government, maybe that something is there's some corruption, and we do have laws that protect folks to bring that to the attention of the authorities, but that can be very risky to people and on many levels, to expose corruption and to try to especially institutions back on track in terms of complying with their obligations. So yeah, it was an interesting character development. I was really glad to see it.
yeah, as opposed to, oh, I'm just going to keep following orders.
Right.
Good. Glad you picked the right team.
Yep.
As opposed to, it's like, make it something analogous to today. Of someone in weapons development finds out that the military is using children and just extracting their souls. It's like, no,
Mhm.
no, no. We're gonna have to tell
Yeah.
Congress.
Great stories recently too. Not great, but I've been reading a lot about sort of the special corporate responsibility in the age of microplastics and forever chemicals. There's a lot of that only came to light because of very brave whistleblowers who realized that what was going on in their respective industries was very harmful, and tried to get it to the attention of authorities, some with more success than others, but very interesting stuff.
Yes, and like the Boeing whistleblowers,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, there's a lot there.
big deal. 3M, Boeing. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about just targeting civilians just cause. So the Imperials figure out that the Bad Batch and Omega are on Pabu. So they attack Pabu to get Omega, and it's just carnage. They're just opening up on civilians just because they want the one kid. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of where, we often have to acknowledge that it's unclear whether stormtroopers are fulfilling a law enforcement role or if they're pursuing an enemy combatant, which, sort of changes things if there's sort of a war going on. But assuming that they're kind of law enforcement, at least when in the US, if law enforcement is pursuing a criminal suspect, there's a proportionality requirement. You can't, the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment prohibits the authorities from using unreasonable force when they're executing a search or trying to seize someone. And they can't just light up a neighborhood if they're pursuing someone who, for example, is just accused of sort of some offense. The only time the authorities are supposed to be able to use lethal force is if there's some direct, immediate risk to health and safety, in order to neutralize a threat like that. But that doesn't ever require kind of just mowing down homes and destroying property and people kind of indiscriminately in the pursuit of just one person. That's not something that would be legal in the US.
Yeah, big no.
No.
Absolute big no of we will burn down the neighborhood to find this one suspect.
Yeah.
Just no.
Yeah. And that sort of thing happens. I mean, it not happens, hopefully with any regularity now, but I mean, in history, that would be sort of the kind of the mob vigilante mob mentality of just kind of pushing in the way into people's homes, kind of turning over furniture, looking for people or looking for contraband, the kind of stuff that the Constitution was designed to prevent, to kind of make sure that people are secure in their homes and in their belongings. But yeah,
Well, that and not having the military do law enforcement's the other one.
yeah,
We just don't do that uh, anymore. So our heroes realize they have to go get the imprisoned Admiral Rampart in order to figure out where Tantus is. So our heroes go out and do a prison break. Those are generally frowned upon, that
yeah,
you don't do that. There are laws preventing prison breaks. There are rules for hard labor for prisoners. So there, we get a good shot of like the manual labor that Rampart and others are doing. It's using heavy machinery. I don't think it's a problem. I don't know if they're getting enough breaks and water rations and that sort of thing. So that could be problematic. Uh,
yeah. I mean,
but
yeah. We had an opportunity to talk about this. Was it last year when we were talking about Andor at WonderCon? And Andor is such an extended, kind of unblinking look at prison labor. And it was such an interesting conversation about kind of, especially in light of kind of the recent years, especially like Ava DuVernay's 13 documentary about the relationship between prison labor and slavery and segregation. And I think that Tony Gilroy really leaned into that. I don't know that he was aware that that was going to be in the zeitgeist, or if it was when he was writing Andor, but gosh, it was timely. And this is just a very brief glimpse of the Empire's tendency to do that sort of thing, but it's such an interesting reminder that when governments go bad, boy, prisoners are kind of people who are incarcerated can be really vulnerable to abuses of those sorts of systems.
and it's happening in the show, which is why Star Wars is a great analogy for raising these issues as a way to discuss them.
Yeah, yeah,
But since it's a fictional show and the Empires are the bad guys, the heroes go out and do a prison break to get out a guy who truly is bad. But it raises the issue that you identified with, Rampart,
another contract. I love it.
a performance contract. So
Yeah.
tell us about it.
Yeah, the clones rescue him, or the rescue, I guess they bust him out of the turbo tank, and um Rampart realizes that he's not dead yet and that they need something from him. And he said, so and I guess it was Crosshair that said we need to know where Tantus is. And Rampart counters with like, well, what's it worth to you? And when Crosshair said you're not really in a position to bargain, I was like, aha, now we have a contract that's forming. They're trying to figure out what they're going to exchange for the information. And of course, just like in every other contract in Star Wars, there's no written agreement, but that doesn't mean that it's not enforceable. It just means that everyone has to understand what they're going to do in order to execute their obligations under this agreement. And Rampart's line is like, you don't get what I want, which is, or you don't get what you want, which is the location of Tantus, until I get what I want. And that was obviously a reference to him getting busted out of prison. So then they get him off the planet, and then they say, okay, now we got you out. Now tell us where Tantus is, expecting that, they've discharged their end of the deal, that he's going to perform his end of the bargain. And then he springs it on them and he's like, well, in fact, I don't really know where Tantus is, but I know how to get you the information. And of course, the clones bristle as anyone would when they realize that there's actually more to the contract than was previously disclosed. So then that leads them into the infiltration of the space station. But it all is based on yet another Star Wars contract where not everyone understood what the other people to the parties of the contract expected or wanted.
Well, and the contract gets modified twice.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets modified by Rampart, and you can modify a contract. So the situation changes, it does require consideration. The consideration cannot be duress. This entire escapade probably would be against public policy, so getting it enforced in court is going to be problematic. That aside, it's a good lesson in, okay, we got to modify the plan, and we're just going to go straight to Coruscant and a big space station and do a Jedi mind trick to get their way, to find out what they need, which is a ton of fun. But they have to modify the second time after getting the intel that they need, and realizing, okay, we're gonna have to follow the ship. And Rampart was not cool with that modification, and I don't think he really agreed to it because he didn't have a choice. It's not like they could have just put him in an escape pod and popped him out in hyperspace, which
Exactly.
which probably would have been better for all parties involved. Uh, but that's the hand that they're dealt.
It was great too that Rampart, part of his objection to the amended terms of the agreement was that he had to accept portraying a rank that was much below, far below what he was accustomed to. I thought that was really funny.
But he wears it well, of like, okay, I can play captain. And he was a young admiral, so it looks age appropriate still.
Yeah.
That he's able to go in and bluff his way through. Which now brings us to impersonating Imperials. That's impersonating government officials is frowned upon, but this is like the joy of spycraft and all of the fun that we have with Star Wars media, that people pretend all the time in order to gain access to the secret base so they can destroy it, get intel, whatever the mission is. So
Aren't you a little in short for Imperial Admiral?
yeah, exactly. But he cleaned up and was able to pull it off. So we get the assault on Tantus itself. Now, this is full on combat. The clones, well, our clones, the Bad Batch, don't really represent a nation state. At this point, they're more independent actors because the nation state that they belong to was gone. So it puts them at a disadvantage because there's no, the Republic's gone. What they fought for and believed in no longer exists. And it'd be one thing to say you're from Alderaan, a planet that's still on board with those ideals, or Naboo, or one of those Star Wars planets that's dedicated to representative democracy where you have freedom. I mean, sure, electing queens is weird, but it's what they
Certainly
do.
not the weirdest thing that happens in Star Wars, but definitely very weird.
Yeah, yeah, it probably, in the top 10, probably at 10, because there's other stuff that's weird.
I
Uh,
mean, she was a cool queen, though. I would absolutely vote for a queen like that.
how does like a 9-year-old know that they want to be the sovereign of a government?
I remember when the Phantom Menace came out, and I was just so fascinated by that whole dynamic, like that you would elect a monarch, so it must just be like some sort of honorific. Maybe there's like a word in ancient Naboo culture that the only approximation is queen or something. It just fascinated me to no end.
Because it's weird. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't want a 9-year-old in charge of the United States. Something, a tantrum could happen and things go sideways fast. So,
absolutely. But at the same time, even in the promos, you could see like how George Lucas was trying to portray her as being like this very wise child.
yeah.
It made me think of the childlike empress from the Never-Ending Story.
Oh,
Um, this
wow.
in fact, some of her styling is really similar. Like she has that at the very end of the Phantom Menace when she has kind of just the silvery kind of drapey crown, and she presents the crystal. She kind of looks like that childlike empress from the Never-Ending Story. I was like, ah, this is the same vibe.
I mean, and to be fair, she also dies of sadness.
True. That is true.
At least
Wah,
there's
wah.
there's no love involved, but still. Uh
Totally.
oh, it did happen twice. All right. So, oh, to be a Gen Xer. So we have the fight that takes place, and it's a big fight. And I did a TikTok about this because the Crosshair did bad things in seasons 1 and 2, and then has a pretty huge redemption arc where he truly does become Dad Batch. Like he's very paternal, more than just a team player, willing to make the sacrifice and goes back for others. And frequently in Star Wars, in live action, the characters who were Team Empire and then realize I made a bad life choice die. You know, Darth Vader and to Anakin Skywalker and Kylo Ren to Ben Solo conveniently die. And so there's no, it's like I would love a Star Wars series where Ben Solo lived and then has to, spends the rest of his life trying to put right all the things he did wrong and going, because there's atonement of like, oh, I did some bad things. I need, I ordered a village slaughtered. Hosnian Prime was destroyed on my watch. I need to seek atonement. Conveniently die, so like that doesn't happen. Ventress is alive. What's she doing? And
Yeah.
she's going on her own path. Crosshair has an arc dealing with life after hate and loses his hand, which brings us to one of your favorite legal topics. Take it away.
Oh, sorry. I was checking to see if I was muted because my cat is kind of conveniently in front of the screen here, and I can't see the controls. In fact, you can kind of see his little ears there. The yes, mayhem is obviously a crime in California that is defined as the intentional attack or assault of someone that is designed to disfigure them in some way. And Star Wars is just full of mayhem crimes. From Darth Vader severing Luke's hand to um, Obi-Wan chopping off Anakin's limbs. There's so many disfiguring crimes happening in Star Wars, and it just tickles me. Not I don't know. It's a weird sixth sense of humor, but there's an actual crime, and it's called mayhem for dismemberment like that. In fact, the I am proud to volunteer at the Rancho Obi-Wan fan museum in Petaluma, and one of the funniest things in Steve Sansweet's collection in the museum is um, the bootleg or kind of fan-made action figures that are just the dismembered limbs. It's And it's, like Count Dooku's, it's just like his head and his hands. It's like the funniest, like bleakest thing that the oh my God, sorry. That the people on the tour always get a really big kick out of. So yes. And when it happened in the Bad Batch, I was like, there it is. Finally, someone has gotten their hand chopped off. It is now officially a Star Wars.
So let's break those down because I believe that what happened to Crosshair definitely is mayhem. When it's because the fighting had stopped, Crosshair is pinned, the
Right.
CX trooper like puts his boot down on his wrist and then cuts off the hand. That's just pure mayhem, mutilation, cruelty.
It is so gratuitous. It's just
Yeah, and I think the same. Well, for Count Dooku taking off his hands, that was in combat. I don't think that qualifies as the crime. Same with Kenobi versus Anakin at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Like that was, he missed the head, but he got, an arm and two legs with his move. So because if he could have taken off the head or cut him in two, like I'm sure he would have. Um and thus that would have been the end.
yeah.
Uh
Yeah, it's a very specific crime where you can charge and prove that someone had kind of intended to do something kind of that would brutalize that person in a way that, sort of makes their life much harder as a, person who's missing a limb. But not to kill them, to just kind of like inflict that extra layer of distress on someone. Yeah, it's a very specific
yeah,
type of crime.
I think Vader likes taking off limbs because it's even
Yeah.
before Luke's hand in the comic when he's beating the crap out of Inquisitors for training, he's taken off limbs left and right.
Yeah.
And the Grand Inquisitor is like, confronts him about it. It's like, well, it's just a limb. It's like, does everyone get a robot hand now? So thanks. Uh,
Yeah. And
so
in
I
yeah. And in the Star Wars universe, cybernetics seem to be fairly common, and they seem to be fairly not only can they kind of be very natural looking, like Luke's hand was
started
sort of
out,
just like,
yeah,
yeah, it's sort of like a replacement hand. I'm sure it was would have been no picnic to have that treatment, but on the other hand, you can also get like really cool weaponized
yeah,
lips too.
yeah, like with the Book of Boba Fett series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So it's almost an upgrade.
I think, Grant, we don't see Crosshair again, like in the epilogue, but I'm sure he got a replacement. I mean, like
Yeah,
they have AZ, they would figure out if Tech could be, or excuse me, if Echo could be rebuilt from what was left of him,
hmm
they could get Crosshair a new hand.
for sure. Yeah, and as I was kind of watching a couple episodes to prepare for our conversation tonight, I realized kind of in retrospect how frequently they showed Crosshair kind of his hand because his trauma was expressed by his ticks in his hand, and how that sort of the final severing from that past was actually severing the hand that was the symbol of his trauma. So I think that, they were making a kind of a statement about his character development there, in a very gory, graphic way, but it's effective. He was really he was very traumatized by his experience, of course, and overcame it by taking the shot that saved.
Yeah, more than one, because
Yeah.
we so on the bridge scene. So we have two very wounded Bad Batchers. So both Hunter and Crosshair have had better days, and like they are definitely working together. But you have the shots up the shuttle's engines that had to be Crosshair as well. So he left-handed takes down the shuttle, and it doesn't blow up, but he takes down the shuttle. He then makes the shot for the handcuffs, And then he and Hunter finished the job. It was just like, bravo. Well done, boys.
Yeah.
Creative team, bless you. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it kind of goes back to what you said before about uh a person one of the characters who has an arc as a villain or as an antagonist kind of grappling with what it means to atone for what they've done. And he pays a very high price, who's sort of symbolized by the hand that he has to part with, sort of symbolically and metaphorically, but also that uh, he kind of re rediscovers his role in the family by resuming that protector role. And when they were interrogating CX1, in fact, they said something like, look, we don't know what you've done. Whatever you've done, you're still a clone, you're still a brother. We can help you. We just need to know how to help you. And I think that that resonated again or echoed again kind of in the finale when they're like, this is the way that you demonstrate your loyalty again to us, and by letting go of your past and realizing that you have a place here.
Yeah, his guy speech, to pull in Galaxy Quest. It's like I'm just a glorified extra. Like it's not like that, but it's our unit died with tech. You guys get to the tower and call Rex. I'll go do this suicide run. And the fact that Wrecker and Hunter are like, no, we'll go do this together. It's great. And it's still a big mission for them to run off and go do by themselves, but they do a great job with it.
Yeah,
They end up getting captured, but
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. And have you watched Tales of the Empire yet?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I mean, because I thought you had mentioned that I think we were talking, can't remember when we were talking, but I remember you saying that you were excited to see how they told Barris's story because you had sort of said that you were interested in seeing that kind of story arc by someone who had done dark side stuff and then had to come back and be redeemed. And I thought that was interesting how they did show her become kind of an inquisitor. She did do some bad things as an inquisitor, kind of echoing Riva's path from Obi-Wan. But again, she kind of is redeemed at the finale, and we don't really see what she does after that. But Barris kind of becomes a healer and kind of like retreats into some solitude and becomes kind of ascetic and spends the rest of her life reflecting on that until she sees her opportunity about how to redeem herself, which is to redeem another inquisitor, and lead another person out of the darkness that she led herself out of, which I think is a great way of talking about redemption and how people put into practice when they discover or when they help themselves or helped by others, they pay that forward and help other people in return. I thought it was a really cool way of portraying that story.
Yeah, I really liked that story
Hmm.
because it was thoughtful. And so was the Morgan one. But
Hmm.
Morgan goes dark.
Yeah.
It's like the light saves her, and then she goes back into the darkness. And like so that's a choice. Varys starts in the light, loses her way, uh, gets put into a situation where she uses self-defense because was it Drago? Oh golly, whoever the pit fight was supposed to be with, where she
Yeah.
realized that she doesn't want to fight in that. And what she does to dispatch him, clearly self-defense. She's the one who's unarmed in that fight. And that arc of, we don't know how many missions they go on, but I don't think she gets through more than one. Because
Mm.
if they go to that planet and it's, I don't know what number sister is her teammate that decides to butcher a town. She sees that I'm out. It it reminds me of the one of the few heroes in the My Lai massacre. Uh, there was one guy on the ground that threw down his weapon and refused to go through with everything. And then there was the helicopter pilot that put his bird in position to save villagers from getting slaughtered. And Barris falls into that category of I'm not following these orders. I thought we were here to save people. You just slaughtered everyone, and I had to make sure you didn't kill the kid. Like
Yeah.
those are all red flags.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny how she I sort of realizing too how they finally find the Jedi fugitive that they're pursuing, and she wants to give the Jedi an opportunity to save themselves and kind of they don't have to die for this, like just come with us. Well, and I think she genuinely believes that they'll be able to help them somehow. I don't know, when you're sort of in that kind of dark place, I think you kind of justify a lot of things, or can justify a lot of things to yourself. And so she was still in that mode. But then ultimately, when she sort of figuratively and literally leads that other Inquisitor out of that maze, out of that dark place, I think that's sort of fulfilling that destiny that she sort of had a taste of when she was trying to save the Jedi.
Yeah, yeah, it was a brilliant 3-story arc that still ends unresolved.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what? And there's questions on like where were we on the timeline? So we know it's post Kenobi,
yeah,
but we don't know how far post Kenobi. And we learned that through Star Wars, people age differently. Uh, Obi-Wan Kenobi at the time of A New Hope, it's like 57 and
yeah,
looks like a hard 70. So
yeah,
living on an ice planet for a decade might do a number on you too,
yeah,
because the sister, was in Fortress Inquisitorius and, probably having 3 square meals a day.
yeah.
And
A very regular skin routine at night. Yeah,
yeah, it's just, it's like being exposed to salt water constantly. It's like you're gonna look a little rough at the end of the day, and
right.
especially if that goes on for years. So with living in the snow, doing that routine, uh, all that said, it's like cool.
Hmm.
I want more.
Yeah,
Keep up the great work because this is thoughtful storytelling that we haven't seen. I mean, like, yes, all the stories have been thoughtful, but they actually go for complex answers.
hmm.
If Rise of Skywalker had ended with Ben Solo living, like that's not just like a high five moment. That's like, what happens now?
Yeah,
It's like Darth Vader conveniently dies. Good. So like, because there'd be some hard explaining for that one. It's because like I'm just gonna wear white and a different outfit now. It's like, it's like, hey, that man with the respirator reminds me of someone. I'm
yeah,
not sure who, the guy in the iron lung.
yeah. That
Hmm.
that raises a lot of very nettlesome questions about justice and sort of um, you know, what you have to do to make things right after you go that far, and do really, really, really terrible things. And um, yeah, and in many ways, the Star Wars films didn't have to grapple with that stuff, and they were very kind of black and white, and
Mhm.
the nuance wasn't as super strong. At least not in Star Wars, but yeah, I think in the television series they get to explore that a little bit more in a little longer format way that can do that some justice.
It's like Agent Callus.
Hmm.
He helped with genocide.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a big mulligan because he defects.
Yeah.
Like,
And he works, I mean, I think the series tries to convince the audience that he does a lot to try to make up for that. And he's very cognizant of what he's done, and he's seeking forgiveness, and he's contrite, and he puts kind of he puts his money where his mouth is, and kind of puts himself at great risk, potentially sacrificing himself to make it right. So yeah, it's interesting. You're right. There is a lot more of that grappling going on in sort of the animated shows and the longer format things, which is great.
which is great. And it's something, a parent our age could talk to their 7-year-old about.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like, let's take some radically complex topics that we don't really broach in live action, so the kids can talk about it. And
Yeah.
I just, because again, reading comics as a kid, like those, a lot of those did touch big issues.
Hmm.
And it's like kids are smart, they get it. I mean, you
Yeah.
still want age appropriate material,
Sure.
but there's a lot here,
Yeah.
and I love it dearly for it.
Yeah. And if it's done well, it's very satisfying, and very, thought provoking, and it's great for the audience too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, positively. So we have the Acolyte coming up. We'll be recording on that. I can say we are returning to San Diego Comic-Con, but that's it. So very excited about the return. Very excited to see friends and go on adventures together. And so stay tuned for what we can, when we can talk about those things. And of course, Japan. So I'm leaning towards Disney Tokyo before the show. Maybe a dinner with giant fighting robots. I mean, there's got to be.
I feel like the robot restaurant closed in Tokyo. I mean, there's got to be more than one, but the one that we went to years ago, I feel like I don't think it survived the pandemic. Maybe
Mm,
they'll reopen by the time that, because it really was something to see. I've seen nothing like it, and it was amazing. But yeah,
well,
something
that
like it for sure.
and the guys from Monster Party have gone to Japan and they recorded it on GoPros, and they went to the Godzilla slide, and
Oh
so
my gosh, have fun.
yeah, it's like Toho doesn't do tours. Subaraya might, I'm not positive. Um, or at least people make a pilgrimage to the studio. I don't know if we'll have time for something like that. It's like I don't want to go to some place that we can't get into. Like that's because time's limited. So, I definitely want to go see Mount Fuji. Disney seems like a safe thing to go do.
Yeah,
Maybe land, stay at the Godzilla Hotel, then Disney, then, the venue hotel. Maybe that's the battle plan,
fun.
maybe. And but we'll find out. So more to come in the days ahead, but we don't have to make those decisions right now.
So exciting.
Yeah, it's neat to have that. Uh and panel pitches will open up, I think it's September. So I don't know if they'll want some lawyers speaking at that show, but that would be fun to go do. And let's see what adventures we can have. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. I know we were away for a while, but work was busy and sorry. But now we're catching up, and we'll definitely be covering Acolyte. So wherever you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and of course, stay geeky. Take care and be well.